Lemmings, the stars of one of the most bizarre and iconic puzzle games ever made. Tiny green-haired creatures who dig, float, and explode their way to freedom or oblivion. But could a species really evolve to follow orders even if it leads to certain death? And today we're going to dive into the real biology behind lemmings, the origins of that infamous cliff-jumping myth, and what it would take to evolve a hyper-obedient species. So, firstly, what are real lemmings like? They're Arctic rodents found in Scandinavia, Russia, and Canada, and they're surprisingly tough, and they weigh just 30 to 100 grams. They have thick fur which insulates them against the sub-zero temperatures, short legs and compact bodies which minimise heat loss, and when the snow sets in they don't hibernate, they tunnel straight into the snowpack, building complex subnivean highways to forage and nest beneath the ice. But they don't actually jump off cliffs. Now, during periods of population boom, lemmings do migrate in large numbers, and that's where some of the confusion started. When the food runs out in their overcrowded home range, they set off en masse in search of new territory. This can lead them across rivers, rocky terrain, even over small cliffs or embankments. And yet, some may fall and drown in the process, not because they're suicidal, but because they're following a powerful instinct to disperse. Bavarian geographer Jacob Ziegler published the idea that lemmings were born not like normal animals, but instead fell from the sky during stormy weather. According to his account, these creatures lived only briefly, dying off when the grass returned in spring, and he believed they had no reproductive organs. However, Danish physician and naturalist Ole Worm disputed Ziegler's spontaneous generation claim, but still believed that lemmings were blown in by the wind. He dissected a lemming and noticed its anatomical similarities to other rodents like voles and hamsters, moving the conversation towards a more scientific explanation. Swedish naturalist Carl Linnaeus, the father of modern taxonomy, finally debunked both theories by classifying lemmings as a natural species of rodent. He recognised that their unusual population cycles made them seem mysterious, but they reproduce like any other mammal. In an 1877 issue of Popular Science Monthly, one article theorised that migrating lemmings, seen swimming into the sea, were actually trying to reach the lost continent of Lemuria, a mythical, sunken land in the Atlantic. Of course, this was pure pseudoscience, but it was another idea that stuck. But that's where things get a bit dark. In 1958, Disney released a nature documentary called White Wilderness. And in it, there's a pretty dramatic scene showing lemmings plunging off a cliff into the ocean, supposedly as part of a natural mass suicide ritual. And that image sort of stuck in pop culture. And it's still referenced in cartoons, memes, and then, of course, in the Lemmings video game. But the problem is it was completely staged. The film crew imported lemmings from Hudson Bay, a region where mass migrations don't even happen, and then they set up a spinning turntable to fling them off a cliff for the shot. So they literally push lemmings to their deaths to sell a myth of blind instinct. So it was drama at the expense of the animals themselves. So while the myth of suicidal lemmings is deeply ingrained in pop culture, the truth is much simpler and much sadder. They're not mindless, they're just caught in a sort of ancient pattern. When the population explodes, they move, and sometimes that movement does end in tragedy. So, could a hyper-obedient species evolve? Game lemmings are a different sort of story. They'll walk straight off cliffs, dig through solid ground, into lava, all because you told them to. No hesitation, no second thoughts. So let's ask the real question. Could a species like that actually evolve? In nature, we do see extreme obedience in some animals, but it's usually in insects. Ants, bees, and termites are eusocial. They live in complex colonies where individuals don't act for themselves, but for the hive. A worker ant won't hesitate to sacrifice itself to defend the nest. Why? Because its own reproduction doesn't matter. Its genes live on through the queen. There are mammals like this too. Naked mole rats, for example. These bizarre little creatures live underground in rigid social structures that mirror insect hives. They have a single breeding queen, workers that dig and defend, and strong chemical signalling that maintains order. So yeah, evolution can create creatures that put the group before the self, even to the point of a suicide mission. This kind of behaviour is rare in vertebrates and especially in mammals. Because for most mammals, survival is tied to individual learning, flexibility, and social bonds. Their obedience isn't blind, it's contextual. For example, wolves follow an alpha not because they're brainwashed, but because doing so helps them hunt better and stay safe. Primates follow group norms because rejection means danger. Even herd animals like deer or zebra don't follow just anyone. They follow movement patterns, scent cues, or leaders with experience. For a mammal to evolve true, unquestioning obedience, you'd need some extreme environmental pressures. Maybe a world where the only survivors were those who followed the leader instantly. Some sort of predator-filled hellscape where even a moment of hesitation got you and your genes eliminated. In that hypothetical world, over thousands of generations, you could get a species where independence is a liability, where natural selection favours instinctive obedience, where turning left because the group turned left is the only way to survive. So technically it is possible, but it would take deep, persistent pressure and a very different social brain. You'd need a species structured more like a hive than a herd. Even without hive minds or brainwashing, lots of animals move together. And from the outside, it can look like blind obedience. Birds flock, wildebeest migrate, fish school. These aren't random groupings. These are all evolved survival strategies. In the wild, being part of a crowd can mean the difference between life and death, because the group protects the individual. Predators can get confused, so risk is distributed. Also, in cold climates, like those that real lemmings live in, huddling means heat retention. But despite what it appears, it's not actually mindless following. These animals are constantly making tiny real-life decisions based on motion, vibration, smell, magnetic fields, even changes in air pressure. It's like a distributed intelligence system. So, although a school of fish might look like one fluid mind, it's made of thousands of independent calculations happening every second. But the systems aren't perfect. Throw in a predator, a sudden noise, a cliff, panic can ripple through the group, and one wrong signal and the coordinated flow collapses into chaos. And that's when you start seeing mass pile-ups, trampling, or yes, things falling off ledges. It's those edge cases that resemble the game. Lemmings takes that basic idea, a group that only knows how to move forward, and turns it into a puzzle. So you're not just solving the level, you're trying to outsmart instinct. Okay, so let's dive into the speculative biology. If the lemmings from the game were real organisms, what kind of biology would make that level of absolute obedience possible? First, you'd need some serious neural rewiring. Specifically neural pruning, which strips out the usual fear responses, hesitation circuits, and individual risk assessment. Most animals evolve to pause at danger, and these creatures would evolve to ignore it. The survival of the group would be their only internal compass. The communication would have to be fast, clear, and instinctual, possibly pheromones, like in ants and termites, or colour pulses, like we see in cephalopods, flashing skin signals to coordinate behaviour, maybe ultrasonic chirps or tactile cues. They wouldn't need language, just a simple universal signal to go. Their brains would be hardwired for execution over evaluation, so there'd be no inner monologue, no weighing up options, just a direct route from command to action. Because in this hypothetical world, hesitation could equal extinction, and the ones that think twice don't make it. Alternatively, if a creature like this did exist, maybe it wouldn't evolve, maybe it would be genetically engineered, lab-built to follow commands, programmed with some sort of behavioural operating system, tiny mammalian task runners designed by some advanced species, maybe even us. So in that case, their obedience wouldn't be some sort of quirk of natural selection, but an intentional design. A A species created not so it could survive on its own, but in order to execute predefined tasks in dangerous environments. Almost like a replacement for the robots that we get to do dangerous tasks today. Either way, they'd have to be small, modular, and efficient. No room for rebellion, and there'd be no value in independence. Their entire existence would be about moving as a unit. And in their world, trust in the group wouldn't be just helpful, it would be the law of life. So, no, the lemmings in the game aren't realistic and don't represent any real species, but they're definitely not nonsense either. They tap into real biological patterns such as mass movement and social coordination. And they remind us that sometimes in nature moving together can mean safety, but only up to a point, because when following becomes automatic, survival can become fragile. And real lemmings? They're not mindless, they're not suicidal, they're just small mammals trying to navigate their big icy habitat. So if you like this kind of speculative biology storytelling, check my videos and like and subscribe. Real lemmings don't drink coffee, but I do. And if you want to help me write more of this science-filled nonsense, you can buy me a coffee at the link below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.